So this is my disclaimer before we get into this video. I need you to keep in mind that I am under the weather. My whole family has been going through. I'm assuming it's a cold. It has to be some sort of cold. Um, I haven't fully gotten it yet. I don't think until today, the day that I would be out here trying to test and shoot things, and it's hot outside and the humidity's high and all that stuff, and I'm freaking miserable. But and probably running a fever on top of it. So just keep in mind that I'm not 100% today, guys. I'm not trying to complain or anything. I do feel very grateful that I have a day off and that I can afford to do dumb things on the internet and load ammunition that pushes the boundaries on things. You know what I'm saying? And so this is just kind of that disclaimer. I am going to ramble and I am going to talk a lot in this video. So sorry for those of you that just want to see the whole watermelons explode and you want to see numbers pop up on chronographs that you've never seen before and that sort of thing. And you don't want to hear me talk, well, that's really just too bad. This is my channel. I'm going to do things the way I want to, not the way things, not the way you want me to do things. So keep in mind, I'm pretty under the weather. If I say some things or like lose my train of thought and stuff, I'm, just kind of deal with it. But if you want to skip around in this video, you totally can. The first probably 12, 13 minutes of this video is just talking. And it's primarily talking about bullet construction and that sort of thing. And then I'm going to do a little shooting and then some more talking and then a little more shooting and some more talking. And then we're going to come inside back in here and we're going to crunch some numbers and based on the stuff we recorded. And then I'm going to show you some ballistic calculator data. And, if the science stuff isn't for you, trust me, I will make a shorter video version of this video. It's just not going to be today because I don't feel like it. I'm going to go ahead and film everything normal and shoot and everything. And then I'm going to string all the clips together. I'm going to make a long video. It's probably going to be 45 minutes long. I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour. And you're just going to have to skip through it if you don't like the talking parts. Okay? So just, that's no big deal. Just skip through it and, adapt, overcome. You know what I'm saying? We'll see you guys later. Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to do another test because there were some complaints about the way I did it the last time. But that's okay. But before we get into the actual testing, who would have thunk it, but we're going to do some talking first about this. And if I kind of lose my train of thought or something mid-sentence, you'll just have to forgive me. I don't know what it is, but we've been all sick in my household this whole past week with some sort of cold or something, and I'm not feeling 100% right now, but the testing must go on. Alright, so before I get in there and actually load these bullets back up, we need to talk about a few things. And so I've had several of you guys commented on my video on the YouTube channel, and then also comment on the posts that I made in Bubba's Pissin' Hot Hand Loads on Facebook. And anyways, if you guys are into some firearms shenanigans, it's a pretty good place to go to see some stuff that's, outside of the box and a little weird sometimes. So with regular bullets, let's look at this first. These two, along with this one, all three of these are all monolithics, and this is a traditional constructed projectile here, which means that it has a lead core and a copper jacket. Okay, so if you have the attention to detail that I do, you will notice that this is 0.452 inches in diameter. Okay, and then the monolithics are both 0.451. Okay, so let me kind of explain why they did that, because I've had a couple people say that, well, when you use a monolithic bullet that's the same diameter, it increases the pressure. And you aren't wrong. I just want to point that out there. You're not wrong. But if that monolithic bullet was the same diameter as this one at 0.452, yes, being a solid one-piece constructed projectile, it is more difficult to start the engraving process with the rifling. So, and the bullet goes from the chamber, you know, through the free bore, and then starts going into the rifling. The rifling, you know, imprints onto the sides of the projectile. And so it does this process called the engraving process, where the rifling engraves into the sides of the projectile. Okay, so if you've got a normal constructed bullet like this Hornady XTP, you see that it's just solid on the sides, and the engraving process works out pretty well. It basically matches the copper jacket in a little bit, and because it has a lead core, it's not super difficult for that engraving process to occur. Now, if you're going to take something like a solid copper, you know, projectile, kind of like this one, or even one of these type here, or one of these, now you've got a solid piece of one piece of material. That's why they're called monolithics. For people that don't understand what that word means, it is one solid piece, it's one piece of material, and basically these are all turned on a lathe of some sort and turned down from a larger piece of material. So what I'm trying to say is, when it's made out of one piece of material, if it's the same diameter, it is going to be harder, and it's going to require more pressure to engrave that bullet with the rifling. The rifling is going to be much more difficult to engrave that rifling into the side of the bullet, and that's what creates the spin on it, and thereby creating stability for the projectile, so that it travels straight down range. That's the reason why modern rifles with rifling in them have exponentially greater accuracy at exponentially greater distances than old smoothbore guns did back in the day. Alright, so to minimize and reduce the amount of extra pressure that monolithics require for the engraving process, they do this in a few different ways. Okay, the one main way of doing this is by reducing the diameter, you know, which they do it by about 1/1000th of an inch. That doesn't sound like much, but it's enough. It's a pretty significant amount, really, considering your rifling is really only about 2 to 3 thousandths depth. Okay, so you reduce the diameter a little bit, and that relieves some of the pressure. And then there's also another way of doing it, and which is kind of what these guys have done here, is, if you'll notice with this Barnes Tac XP, there is no, you can see that the side is completely smooth, and versus this, where it appears to have a band here and a band here. Now actually, it's not, these aren't bands. What it is right in between them is what you would call a relief cut. So it reduces the surface area that's getting engraved by the rifling, and thereby reducing the amount of pressure required to engrave the rifling into the projectile. And the same thing with this right here. This is a Barnes TTSX tipped triple shock extreme, I think is what they call these. And so they've added a couple of relief cuts in there to reduce the pressure required to engrave the bullet. So the engraving is actually, it's engraving less of the surface area of the bearing surface on the bullet. Okay, so that'll help reduce the pressure in the firearm and keep everybody safe. So they've done two things to these. They've reduced the diameter down by 1/1000 of an inch, and then also added relief cuts. And so in two ways they have, with that particular bullet, they have reduced the amount of pressure required to engrave it. And then also with this Liberty civil defense projectile is the same way. It's a reduced diameter, and it also has this massive relief cut on the bearing surface. And so to those of you that were saying that you know, using these monolithics are gonna really spike the pressure up and cause issues, well, normally you'd be correct, but these manufacturers are pretty smart, and they intentionally make the bullets a little bit smaller in diameter, and they intentionally add the relief cuts in there to minimize that, you know, or mitigate that potential possibility of increased pressure. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about here by actually giving you some measurements. So we're going to look at this one, and we're going to take a look on the calipers here, make sure they're zeroed. All right, first things first, we're going to get the main body here. So let's see if I'm doing this right. Okay, there we go. So 0.4515, so it may be just barely slightly over 451. And then you get the center drive band, same diameter, and then same diameter there. Now let's see how deep these relief cuts actually are. Whoa, 0.436. The rifling's not even going to touch that part of the bullet. So that's how that works. You reduced the amount of bearing surface that has to go through the engraving process. And then we're going to look at this Liberty civil defense here, and the base of it, ooh, dropped it. Base of it is actually, this one's actually 0.452. All right, and then the other band in the center, see if I can get that on there good, is 0.451. And that's fine. They probably did that to mitigate some gas loss, to try to keep some of the gases from escaping around the bullet. And then if we look at the relief cut section, it's 0.444. Again, that's smaller in diameter than the rifling is, so that part of the projectile is not even going to touch the rifling. And again, they've only got this little section here and this little section here that are actually going to go through the engraving process. And if you're wondering what this is, if you haven't seen the other video, the only way I could pull these projectiles from the casings was to use a Dremel tool and kind of score the casing and cut the side of the casing, and then hammer it out using a kinetic puller. And the reason why is these bullets are so light, they're only 78 grains, they don't create enough inertia trying to pull them with that kinetic bullet puller to actually pull them out of the casing. They just don't weigh enough, you know, like you need weight basically to get that to work correctly. So all right, we're about 11 minutes into this video and we haven't even started shooting yet, and so I'm sure there's a bunch of you guys that are really not on board with this right now, and that's fine, because again, this is my channel and I'm going to do things the way I'm going to do it. So now that we've gone over bullet construction and then some characteristics of monolithics and how they are actually designed to not increase pressure, like some of you were claiming that they would, now we're going to get back in here. I'm going to load the last 4 of these up that I have, and then we're going to start doing some testing, okay? Alright, so there we go. Got 4 loaded up for testing. And yes, I did use this Lee hand press. Surprisingly enough, it does exceptionally well. I've loaded, I don't know, a few thousand rounds on that thing. And, you know, I don't know. It's actually, the reason why I have it is it's packable. I can literally take that thing and a set of dies and a pound of powder and you know, like 1,000 primers or something. And then, yeah, I could totally just throw all of that in a backpack with a set of calipers and a powder scale. And that's literally all I need. And, you know, I can reload ammunition anywhere. I don't have to have a big bench mounted press. Now I do have a big bench mounted press and I've got one of the big Lee ones for uh, it was like the classic 50 press, so it was designed for loading 50 BMG on, and I use it for everything, you know. But actually, for just convenience and ease of use, this little Lee press works just fine. And I've even loaded ammunition for like my 6.5 PRC on it, and you know, and they shoot great. I actually am surprised of how consistent that little hand press will load ammunition, because I've loaded ammo on it and I've shot like 3-inch groups with it at 300 yards, you know, or less. Actually, the last time I went out, I managed to shoot a .8 3-inch group at 300 yards with that 6.5 PRC. And yeah, so if you think that the cheap Lee presses and the cheap Lee dies aren't good, I mean, I don't know, maybe you're just not using them right. Because I've actually gotten better results with these Lee dies than I have with my Redding dies. And, you know, like, I've got a set of Redding dies for my 6.5 PRC that were like $300, and I really don't like them, to be honest. I've gotten better results using Lee dies. I've got some Hornady dies too. I'm not a huge fan of the Hornady dies. Um, I just, they seem kind of, you know, I don't know, like there's a lot of friction, like the machining maybe is not just perfect on them. And surprisingly, those Redding dies that cost as much as they do, the machining's not great on them either. And I was actually pretty disappointed when I got them, considering I was thinking, hey, I'm going to spend some good money here and I'm going to buy me a really nice set of dies to go with my really nice long range rifle. And I got them in, and I kind of wish I'd have just bought a $60 or $70 set of Lee dies, because they actually, in most cases, work just fine. They work actually exceptionally well for the money. I use them for my 6.5 Creedmoor. I use them for 308. You know, I use them for 10 millimeter, 9 millimeter, 38 357, 454 Casull, obviously. And then I also just bought a set of 460 Smith & Wesson Magnum Lee dies. So don't knock the cheap stuff. You know, the Lee dies, they've been around for, since, I don't know, reloading began, and they are they're really good. You know, save your money. I mean, unless you're gonna buy a really really nice set of custom dies, I totally wouldn't spend the money on Redding dies. I'm pretty disappointed in that whole ordeal, to be honest. So, you know, maybe some of you guys use those high end dies like that, and y'all have exceptionally great results with them. Maybe I just got a crap set of Redding dies. I don't know, but you know, you pay that kind of money for a set of dies, you kind of expect them to be exceptional at what they do, and I really haven't noticed the difference between them and like Lee dies as far as any accuracy stuff. So, got these loaded up. Enough talk about reloading stuff and dies. Got these ready to go. I didn't use the nickel plated casings this time because I had a bunch of these that were already primed and I just didn't want to go through that process. So let's take this show outside here in just a few minutes. I'm going to gather some things. We'll set the chronograph up, and first things first, we're actually going to run a 22 over it, and we may even run some 9mm over it, because some of you guys, again, complaining, telling me that my chronograph isn't calibrated and all that nonsense. And man, if that was true, there would be no way for me to build my dope charts the way I do for shooting long range. If my chronograph was that far off and it just was giving me false readings all the time, there would be no way that when I build my dope charts for long range shooting, there would be no way that my dope charts are accurate. And my dope charts are pretty dang accurate, so that tells me my chronograph is probably working perfectly fine, even though, you know, it's a cheap one, like $100 one. Maybe if I get enough of you guys on board following me on the YouTube, maybe I can start making some money doing this, and I will be able to afford to buy one of those new Garmin chronographs. Now, they came out like a few months ago, and everybody and their mom's got one, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm freaking jealous of them because I want one. I just can't turn loose of like $600 for a chronograph. You know what I'm saying? Especially when I know the one I've got works fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Sure, it's a little finicky, and getting it lined up and everything for it to work correctly is kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, the Garmin, I can totally see where, you know, just being able to set it out beside you and point it in the same direction you're shooting, and it just works. That's awesome. You know, using one of these that you shoot over the top of requires you to get out in front of your rifle and make sure it's in line with the rifle. Make sure you're shooting over the top of it so you don't shoot your chronograph. I've done that before. And, you know, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, maybe one day I'll get me one of the Garmin ones. I would really love to have one, but not today, not anytime soon. Let's get outside and start setting up for testing. All right, so because you guys complained that I had my chronograph too close to the muzzle, well, now I've moved it to 10 feet. So I'm doing two things here. I want to show you that my chronograph is in fact calibrated correctly, and also shooting it at this range will show you that you know, obviously we're not getting any potential muzzle blast issues with the chronograph reading incorrectly. Okay, this is my CZ Pro Varmint, CZ 457 Pro Varmint, and I've got the Athlon Cronus BTR scope, and then an Area 419 pick rail on it. So today I'm just gonna shoot some standard velocity Magtech ammunition. I think that, yeah, 40 grain. So I'll load 5 rounds over this, shoot it over this at here at 10 feet, and then I'm gonna move the target down to 50, or sorry, I'm gonna move the chronograph down to 50 yards and shoot another 5 rounds over it at 50 yards, so you guys will know that it's working correctly. Should be zeroed. So let me get y'all zoomed in on the chronograph. All right. Let's see what we got. $1,116. $1,106. 1084, 1075, 1106. All right, so now I'm going to move the chronograph all the way down to 50 yards. I don't think you're probably going to be able to read it, but I'll be able to read it through the scope on the rifle. So let's see what happens. All right, so the chronograph is down there at 50 yards. Hopefully I don't shoot it. So we're going to shoot another 5 rounds. I'll just have to call out the reading on it down there at 50 yards by looking through the scope, because there's no way you're going to be able to see it on my cell phone camera. Okay, here we go. $9.96. $10.34. $10.19. $10.07. And $10.30. So I'm pretty sure my chronograph is working just fine. We can go ahead and take a walk down here, show you what I'm shooting at. Now, for whatever reason, that gun, and it may be something to do with just rimfire in general, 22s. The first round, like if I just load 5 rounds in there, the first round is always off. It shoots like an inch, inch and a half, maybe 2 inches outside of the group sometimes. And then the next rounds always get in the group. So this is a little 1-inch rimfire target. This was the first round on the first group, and then 4 rounds in here, and then first round on the second group, and another 4 rounds inside that 1-inch deal there. And this is at 50 yards. So there's your 10:30 on the last shot. Let's grab this chronograph. We'll pull it back up here. I don't think I don't need to do any further testing on this. My chronograph works, and it's reading just fine. There's no calibration issues, obviously. So I'm going to bring it back up here. We're going to break out the Browning 1885 high wall, which is a falling block action. I've had a few people ask me in the comment section, like, man, what kind of rifle is that? I've never seen one like that chambered in that kind of cartridge before. Well, it's a Browning, made in the early 2000s probably, and they didn't make very many of them, so kind of a rarity. But it is a Browning 1885 high wall, chambered 454 Casull. I wouldn't be doing this kind of testing in any other firearm, to be honest. That falling block action that Browning designed is really, really, really strong. You know, arguably the strongest firearm action ever designed, and so I feel pretty safe using it to test things in. Okay, so I'm gonna go get that rifle, get the chronograph set back up. Golly, I can't believe I'm out of breath. This sickness sucks. I like literally have run 8 miles this week, and then now Saturday here, I'm out of breath from walking, walking down that 50-yard target a few times. Dang cold. Oh, this sucks. It's freaking hot out here. I'm sweating, probably running a fever, but let's get this stuff done. All right, so before we send the super heckin' fast 78 grain 454, you know, Mach 3.5, just amazing 454 rounds downrange. We're going to do a little test over the chronograph with some regular 454 ammo. So this is 240 grain XTP mag with an advertised muzzle velocity of 1900 feet per second. It's important to note that that advertised muzzle velocity is typical for a 6 to 8 inch revolver. This is not that. This is a 5.12 inch Raging Hunter, although it is chambered in 460. So I probably am getting all, you know, about probably closer to 5.5 inches of barrel time there. But I'm gonna shoot probably 1 or 2 rounds out of the revolver over the chronograph just to see what it does, and I'm gonna shoot 1 or 2 out of the rifle to get a comparison on velocity, and then we're gonna shoot 2 rounds of the 78 grain Liberty Civil Defense in the 454, and then I'm going to move the chronograph down there 250 yards and shoot another 2 rounds at the same spot and see what it does. Okay, so I'm going to get y'all adjusted back up where you can see the chronograph. Hopefully I get in line with this thing. Let's see what 240 grains looks like. It's like recoil RS or something right here, I'm telling you. Everybody ready? Maybe I need to put my phone over here. Yeah. This muzzle blast is pretty ridiculous. So 1610, of course the chronograph is there at about 10 feet, so that's I'm actually surprised that's lower than I thought it would be. I thought it would be probably at least 1700. Let's do one more round just for the S&Gs. 1586, so I guess that's about right. I guess it's reading correctly. We didn't get any wild variation there. So let's move the rifle over. Make sure I'm gonna try to get on target, and then make sure I'm over top of the chronograph. I think we're looking pretty good. So 240 grains out of a 28 inch barrel now, not a 5 inch barrel, 28 inch barrel. Chronograph at 10 feet. Oh, bring the pain in 3, 2, 1. 2241. So what is that? We gained 600 feet per second, maybe a little more than that, from going from a 5 inch barrel to a 28 inch barrel. And man, it just kicks, dude. Like, that just hammers the old shoulder. Let's see if we're gonna do one more just to confirm. 2237. So yeah, about 600 feet per second faster, maybe a little more, maybe 650. But that's a 240 grain XTP mag. All right, we're gonna fire 2 rounds of this Liberty Civil Defense. 2 rounds, 78 grain monolithic copper hollow point, loaded to the max. Well, actually it's not. Running these not quite to max, about 58,000 psi or so, according to GRT. Now, I mean, your mileage can vary. It may be more pressure than that, maybe a little less pressure than that, but I think it's a safe load. It's under that whole, 65,000 psi max pressure. So let's go ahead and get you zoomed back in on the chronograph. Hopefully we don't miss the chronograph. Let's see what we got. $37.74, and that's at 10 feet from the muzzle. For those of you that were all upset about me shooting at 2 feet from the muzzle, which is, by the way, that's how I normally do it. Now, these are likely slowing down very, very, very fast because they have a ballistic coefficient that is 0.05. Not 0.5, but 0.05 in a G1. So they really kind of suck as far as flying down range. They're going to lose speed and energy very, very fast because they don't weigh very much, and they just don't have all that ass behind them. They're just going, they're going to be great probably up to about 50 yards, and past that they're not going to be worth a crap. .3808, not too bad. Let's go take a look at this target and take the chronograph down there. So by putting the chronograph there at 10 feet and then also moving it down here to 50 yards, I will be able to do a calculation and get the actual true ballistic coefficient based on the decay in velocity from that 10-foot position of the chronograph to the 50-yard position, and then I will be able to calculate my actual muzzle velocity. So here's the target. Those two, the two 240 grain bullets, they were side by side right here, and then the first round of that 78 grain hit here, and then the second round hit up here. So, the group's, I guess, okay. I mean, if you wanted to hunt with it at 50 yards, but it's not perfect, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to set the chronograph hopefully below that. We're going to shoot over the top into this target, and hopefully I don't smoke my chronograph at 3,800 feet per second, because that would be pretty unfortunate. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous. That's only about 2.5 inches above my chronograph, so I think maybe I'll add a little bit of elevation to it. Maybe go up about 1/2 mil, maybe a full mil, because at 100 yards a full mil would be 3.6 inches. So at 50 it's gonna be half of that, which is 1.8. So let's add a mil to it, and then we'll run the test. Oh man, I'm nervous. I don't want to blow my chronograph up. Then I'll be forced to spend $600 on a Garmin, because I'll be damned if I buy another one of these that I got a monkey with every time I take it somewhere to test some ammo. There's really no point in me trying to film down there at the chronograph with this camera, so you guys are just gonna get to watch me shoot this. Make sure. Okay, yeah, looks like chronograph is looking good. Let's go up a full mil, just as a safety precaution. I'm trying not to smoke a chronograph today. 78 grains.
Let's see what it is at 50 yards. (2,535 feet per second at 50 yards. Cool. So 2535 at 50 yards. Let's see what the second round shows. (2655). So even a little faster. It's kind of interesting. It seems to me that they're not super consistent, and that could be due to some gas leakage. You know, because when I did pull those bullets out, I did have to Dremel the side of the casings, and I did put a little mark in the edge of the side of that bullet. So there could be some gas leakage, and some rounds may be quite a bit faster than others. Who knows? We really don't know what's happening to the bullet in flight. We do know that it is getting to the target in one piece. So let's go check that out, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. So the grouping is not great, but I say if you wanted to shoot a deer with it at 50 yards, you totally could. I mean, it would hit the vital zone radius you're looking for, so. So that last one read 2655. I don't think, maybe I got very straight over the chronograph or something. I'm not sure what's going on. But, so the first two rounds were here. That was our first two rounds, our group size. And then our second two rounds after I moved it a mil up are right here. Okay, so it's almost the same thing, like these two rounds and then those two rounds, and they're, you know, at 50 yards they are, ooh, you know, about 2 inches apart, give or take. You know, that's a 1 inch dot, so, you know, outer edge to outer edge, probably 2 inches, maybe a little more. So not terrible. But let's go back and review some of this information. You know, and it's important to note that I don't think that last shot up here was directly over the chronograph, and that's why it read 2655 versus the other one at over 3,500. So we're gonna use the 3,500 data for our 50-yard data, and then we're gonna use an average of the other two shots up there at 10 feet. For our 10-foot data, we're going to plug it into a ballistic calculator. We're going to calculate the BC of the bullet, the ballistic coefficient, which more or less is a representative number of how much drag there is on the bullet, and basically how fast it slows down. So, you know, or basically how easily it slips through the air. These bullets do not slip through the air very well. They are not, they do not have a high ballistic coefficient. So, you know, short range, they will be absolutely devastating. Long range, probably not so much. So, another thing too, if you notice, if you want to go scroll back just a couple minutes there, if you look at the holes in that target, there's no signs that the bullets are coming apart in the air. They're just putting round holes in the target. So as far as that concern goes, they remain intact. They're stabilized. They're not necessarily just super match grade accurate, as we saw compared to the 240 grain XTPs. The two that I shot were literally touching at 50 yards, which is pretty good for, you know, just a handgun cartridge. You know, it's not really designed for precision. So with that being said, let's go crunch some numbers. Get the heck out of the heat, man. I'm freaking sweating out here and feel like I'm getting a little delirious maybe. I know I'm rambling and probably shouldn't be outside right now. Probably need to be in the AC. But anyways, let's get in here and crunch some numbers. Alright guys, hopefully you can see what's going on here. This is a program called JBM Ballistics, and I use this as my primary ballistic calculator. Now, I did use a type of calculator to kind of get me an idea of the ballistic coefficient. Now it's important that we set this to G1, and we're using a 78 grain bullet and a .452 caliber. Now, we went over before that the bullet is actually not .452, it's like .451. Actually, the base of the bullet is 452, and then the forward band on the bullet is 451. But it is 452 caliber, and it's important to note that because it's a 454 Casull, so it's the same. It's 452 and 454 Casull. It's 452 and 460 Smith & Wesson. It's 452 and 45 auto, and so on. So some people were like, I did have a couple people thinking about loading this round in a 4570, but they fail to know that 4570 is not .452, it's .458. So this little projectile would just have fallen in and out of the casing on the 4570. It's just not going to work. It's not big enough in diameter to engage the rifling on a 4570, so it's going to be wildly inaccurate if you even attempted and somehow got it to shoot in one of those. So don't do that. And plus, you're going to have tons of pressure loss and gas leakage around the bullet and that sort of thing. You're not going to build any kind of speed anywhere close to what I'm doing if you try to do that. So just don't do that. All right. So we crunched some numbers, and here I'm just going to pull this up. So at 50 yards over the chronograph, we got an average of 25.95. And at 10 feet, we got an average of 37.91. So literally 1,200 foot per second loss from 10 feet to 50 yards with these bullets. So 1,200 feet per second in that short of a distance and that short of amount of a time of flight that's huge. I mean, that just tells you right there, these bullets have a very, 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 probably like the worst ballistic coefficient of any projectile, as far as I know. And I don't know, there could be worse ones, but these are so terrible, and it has to do with them being so lightweight and having so much surface area, being 45 caliber, you know. So this program, JBM Ballistics, I use this quite a lot, especially building my long range charts, you know, and I use it for shooting, you know, as far as I want, up to, you know, like 2,000 yards in some cases. So we're going to start with this, and we're going to set muzzle velocity at 37.91. Oh. 37.91. We're going to set chronograph distance at 10 feet. And then we're going to go down here and calculate. Alright. So using that ballistic coefficient, really what we're looking for is this here. So it's showing at 0 at the muzzle. It should be about 3,857 feet per second. And then let's go down to 50 yards. 50 yards is showing 29.53. So
the ballistic coefficient obviously is too high. Like 0.5 is even too high. Okay? So let's see if we can figure out what that ballistic coefficient actually is. Let's back up. We're going to go let's do 35. 0.035. And run the calculation. Come down here to 50 yards. 2539. Okay, we're pretty close. It's a little bit, ballistic coefficient's a little bit higher than that. So I'm gonna say it's 0.37. 0.037. Have you ever like dealt with ballistic coefficients that are 0.037? That's just insane. 2598 at 50 yards down there, if you're seeing where my cursor's at. So we got 2595. 2598 is pretty dang close, so we're going to call the ballistic coefficient 0.037. So 0.037 for a G1 ballistic coefficient. Okay, and now let's go up here and see what that is at the muzzle. That's 3,890 feet per second calculated at the muzzle, with the chronograph set at 10 feet, which is roughly 9 yards. Or no, sorry, that's roughly, 3 yards. So yeah, there you go. So really, really, really terrible ballistic coefficient. Now, let's look at muzzle energy. Is kind of interesting. So we're going to show like 2,600 foot-pounds at the muzzle. Let's see what it is at 50 yards. Oh, wow. Yeah, only about 1169 there. Under 1,200 foot-pounds. Now, I'm not saying that's not nothing to sneeze at. Nearly 1,200 foot-pounds of energy is a lot. That's a whole lot. That's 44 Magnum at the muzzle, and this is at 50 yards with a 78 grain bullet. So it's still a friggin' it's still a badass round. Not gonna lie, it's still incredible. But I would really love to see and do some ballistic gel testing. Now, in the previous test, setting the chronograph 2 feet from the muzzle, we did show 3,970 feet per second. But again, I only tested one round. That could have been a fluke round. 2 feet from the muzzle going that fast. From what I've seen though on the primers, I could hop these up a little more. But this actually gives you an actual calculated and kind of dialed in average of how these bullets are going to perform and what kind of muzzle velocity I'm actually, it can expect, and that's kind of how I build my long range charts, because sometimes I get some pretty wild, above average speeds sometimes, and then I build my chart, and then I'm kind of disappointed because my bullets are hitting lower than what my chart says, and then I go back and retest and check muzzle velocity and stuff at different distances, and I realized that, hey, my charts were a little optimistic. So that one round at 3,970 was probably a little optimistic, I'm not gonna lie, but this is still pretty dang incredible. I mean, we're still in that realm of 3,800 plus feet per second, and at 10 feet, and 3,890, I mean, that's almost 3,900, so it's not too far off from what I was seeing in that first test. I mean, we're talking 80 feet per second difference. We've seen today, we saw an extreme spread that was 120 feet per second out there at 50 yards. That was the extreme spread on those 2 rounds at 50 yards that, You know, ideally, the way that this should have been tested was I should have had a chronograph at 10 yards and a chronograph at 50, and we would have got the 10-yard measurement and the 50-yard measurement at the same time, you know, for each round, for each specific loaded round. And then we could build a better idea of what the drop is, and we could build a better idea of what the muzzle velocity is if I had that. But I've only got one chronograph, so who knows? Maybe if somebody wants to send me one, you want to send me an extra one of these $100 Caldwell chronographs, I will totally buy another box of that ammunition, pull the bullets out, and do this whole test over again, just to be able to do that. I think that would be really cool. Or, you know, maybe somebody wants to send me some Christmas money, and I'll buy me one of those Garmin chronographs, and we'll shoot it with the Garmin next to the rifle, and then we'll shoot over the top of this Caldwell chronograph. And if I end up shooting it through the display, oh well, I just won't worry about it. But, you know, because I have shot a chronograph before, it has happened while I was testing some 38 special. Yeah. Anyways. So, with everything being said, I know 99.9% of you guys didn't watch through the whole this whole video, and you guys don't care anything about the friggin' science, you don't care about the math, and that's cool. You just want to see numbers pop up on a chronograph, and you want to see watermelons get destroyed, and you want to hear loud noises, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But some of us that, you know, like the science, like these numbers on the screen here are what are important to me. You know, I could go without all the other nonsense, but, you know, and like the recoil, man, I forget, you know, that rifle shooting friggin' 240 grain bullets out of it, or even 300 grain bullets out of it, even though with the scope and the bipod on there and stuff, it's a little over 11 pounds, it still sucks, you know, like, especially when you jump up there in 300, 325 grain bullets. They may not be going as fast, but man, they suck. They hurt. And I don't realize how much I appreciate low recoiling rifles until I grab a hold of a high recoiling rifle and punish myself. And I'm not like trying to be a bitch about it, but you know, because I've literally taken that rifle out and I've shot 100 rounds through it at the range with 325 grain bullets, and if you do that, you're gonna be sore for a friggin' week. Like literally, your shoulder's gonna be just purple. And I'm not saying, you know, I mean, I know Kentucky Ballistics. Like I don't have shit on that guy. He's got some rifles and some big bore calibers and some high recoil that's like 10, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times as much as what I'm experiencing with this 454. But you know, it's still like I've shot 100 rounds through it in one session at the range, and I totally regret it for probably the next 5 to 7 days. But anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know I'm long-winded, but you know, there's some things that I think are really important, and my channel currently is not supported in any way, shape, or form. It's only supported by my day job. So there you go. I'm going to film the things the way I film it. Now, I will say I probably will cut this down and make a short version of it. I'm just not doing it today, man. I don't feel like it. I'm sicker than crap. Got this head cold. Probably run a fever. And it's like 85 degrees outside right now. And I'm even indoors. And it's 70 in my house. And I am sweating. Sweating. And I don't like it. So you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time in the next video.